Hello and welcome to Fraud Talk, the ACFE's monthly podcast. I'm Rihonna Scoggins, the content manager for the ACFE, and today I'm joined by Shai Gabay, Trustmi CEO and co-founder. With economic uncertainty rising and budgets tightening, companies are under intense pressure to do more with less. That often means streamlining processes, switching vendors, and trimming down layers of approval, all in the name of speed and efficiency. On the surface, these moves look like smart business decisions, but underneath, something more dangerous is happening. In their rush to adapt, many organizations are overlooking the connections between departments, systems, and decisions. The result? Gaps begin to form, and fraudsters are quick to exploit them. Controls that look strong on paper can fall apart when upstream processes are skipped or siloed teams fail to share critical information. What you don't see in one part of the organization can unravel everything later. Today, we're unpacking how these blind spots form, why fraudsters thrive in reactive environments, and how leaders can start connecting the dots across the process to see and stop fraud before it happens. Hi, Shai. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, glad to be here.
So, before we get started and get into our questions, can you share a bit about your role and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So my role today is the co-founder and CEO of Trustmi, and basically I got to that role with a long time experience in cybersecurity. Started to do offensive security, started to do hacking when I was 13 years old. When I was 18, went to the military, spent 8 years in the intelligence corps, playing offensive most of the time. After that, I went to be practitioner, went to be in the other side to do defense in a bank. So I did that for 8 years. Work with a lot of early stage companies. Really enjoyed the idea of innovation, solving business problem using technology. And I saw the problem of B2B payment fraud from a lot of our corporate customers. And that's how I got to that point that I want to build my own company. After that, I resigned my role as a CISO. I crossed the line to the dark side, went to three cybersecurity startups in order to learn how to build my own company, and started Trustme 3.5 years ago.
Wonderful. So, to start us off, what are you seeing in today's climate that is causing companies to sort of rethink how they work with vendors?
So I think there are a lot of things that going on. So first of all macroeconomics. Think about all the situation with the US-China trade war, all of that. That causing a lot of organization to rethink how they work, what type of bank account they use, and where are they located, which vendors are you using, and where are they located. So that's first create a lot of much more need to change and updates in bank accounts. But in addition to that, there are a lot of different things that going on. Like in Europe, there was a real-time payment regulation. There are a lot of things that start to push organization to make payment much more efficient and automated. So obviously, it's changing a lot how we work with vendors and what we need to do in order to support it.
And with a lot of these rapid changes, we're seeing businesses rushing to reduce operational costs, right back to that macroeconomic factor. What are they not considering when it comes to fraud risk?
So I think that if you think about fraud risk, first, I don't know a lot of organizations that really have good monitoring or tracking on how big this problem for them. By the way, I think that B2B payment fraud is one of the biggest problem in cybersecurity. And in most of the organization, they are not tracking it. Most of the organization that I'm speaking with and I know about, when they have an incident, it's something that they speak internally in a very small groups. It's something that they keep and report it in very, very slow and small groups, basically. So I think one of the problem is that this is one of the biggest problem, but it's unspeaking about.
Hmm, absolutely. So, inside organizations, there's often a push to move faster and be leaner. How does that kind of cultural pressure affect the way that fraud risk shows up?
So, most of the fraud cases are based on social engineering. Now, social engineering is exploiting the human being. Now, urgency is one of the best way to make a pressure or to make someone to do something, right? And now, when people and teams are measured based on amount of transaction that they are doing, amount of volume, and so on, and they need to do uh, much more transaction, much faster and effective. So obviously, that become much bigger risk from fraud perspective because they are much more susceptible to those type of attacks.
When internal guardrails get relaxed, fraudsters take notice, right? And in today's world, they've got new tools that make impersonation not just possible, but convincing. What does vendor impersonation look like today, and how has it evolved with Gen AI?
So I think that vendor impersonation was always a big issue. And basically, even if you go back a few years ago, the biggest case that happened was the Google and Facebook case. But back in those time, they didn't have right language. There was a lot of typos, not always the right context. It was much uh, pains play and try to make it work. But in today's world, with Gen AI, they have access to really understanding the context easily. There are no typos anymore. There are framework that can create urgencies with involving different stakeholders and a lot of different people like that to make it much more compelling and to make it happen faster. And in the other side, you still usually use manual controls and processes as the best tool to defend it. So obviously, it's supercharged the attackers.
Definitely. I think that that phrasing, it's supercharged the attackers, is so accurate. So, can you give us an example of how attackers are using internal org structure, like who approves what, to time or plan their attacks?
Sure. So it's again going back to the same point of the social engineering and the urgency, for example. So we saw a lot of cases, and by the way, there are dark web tools that are offered as service and different ways to do that. But basically, what they do, they map the organization, like in sales side today, people are using sales navigator to map the decision makers. How can I get to the right people? So cyber criminal are doing the same automatic to really understand who's the decision makers, who can really make it pass very easily, and they inject fake conversation that never happened, allegedly with people that were supposed to approve it. Let's say, for example, that and now you'll get an invoice, and it's not just that this invoice was real, but now we will have a full conversation or thread of conversation saying that the CEO of the company already pulled it. We need it for an urgent project, and we need it now. And why you didn't do it right now, right? So that add much more um, reality to this scenario, and also urgency for the team to really execute it.
Definitely. So, digging a little deeper into that, which teams or departments are usually those weak points during these transitions and transactions?
So I think in any organization it will be a bit different because different organization and especially in the finance side have different roles. But at the end of the day, it's mostly the teams that are responsible to doing the change on the bank details, collecting invoices, or different business owner that can be um, used to make a pressure and so on. Those will be the one that will be more targeted. I also want to say that at the end of the day, cyber criminals realize today that the easiest route to make profit out of organization is going to the people that has access to the funds and to transfer. So those will be the most targeted people in those type of.
So now that we've sort of identified what those weak points could be,
Mhm.
what are some red flags that a company might be headed towards a fraud incident, even if nothing's happened yet?
Yeah. So by the way, that's a great question because we started to see much more sophisticated in the attacks, and more sophistication. It's not only using more technology like deepfake and so on. It's also to make the process a bit longer, but more realistic. So, for example, almost any organization that we are speaking with, when we ask them what's the most common control that they are using today, is, for example, if someone asks you to change your bank details, everyone are very concerned about that, and they have a lot of different manual controls, like callback procedure, send me the details, blah 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 blah, right? But what if I were just send an email saying, our main contact person left the company, he retired, please update the new contact details? Will that case will be the same suspicious level with the bank account change? Not necessarily. And we saw a lot of cases recently in the last few years that the attacker first will ask to change the contact details, and only a few weeks later they'll come up and ask for the change bank account details. But basically, what they did, they passed the manual controls of the callback procedure. So that's one aspect of that. Other item is changing others details. Obviously, the bank account details, it's a big flag. But there are a lot of small things that they will try to start in order to make the attack effective later on.
Interesting. So you sort of mentioned it earlier with, some companies not even having those internal controls or those teams set up to identify fraud. Do you think most organizations even have the visibility to see these risks building up?
So I think that it's not that they don't have the right controls. I even going to say most of the organization have too much controls. Like it's make the process so comprehensive that it's very hard to really understand. I think one of the biggest problem or one of the biggest vulnerabilities is the process itself. Think about the B2B payment for a second. It's a very complex process first because it's involved a lot of different people inside and outside the organization. On top of that, obviously, we have email security, but at the end of the day, everyone will communicate with email because that's the best channel exists today. Although it's the source for all evil, right? So everyone use that as a source of truth because that's what exists. And then you have a lot of different systems involved in the finance organization. Procurement, supplier portals, ERPs, the payment itself. Each one of them will be siloed. And on top of that, you have a lot of manual validation that each part doing their own thing. So at the end of the day, think about it. It's a long process with a lot of people that each one doing their own thing, but no one really connecting the dots to make sure that the process itself was impactful. Now, one of the comment that I hear a lot from companies, but we have segregation of duties, for example. We have two signatures, right? Two different people need to review and approve. But now, how that's really work? Those people are relying on a lot of other people to do their controls and those manual controls properly. But you don't really know what happened all over the chain. So let's assume that someone changed the contact detail. Later on, someone changed the bank details. At the end, the signatures will execute it because this is the right vendor. The amount sounds legit. We have the PO, everything is okay, and there are no real concern. But it was already changed, and at the end, it will send to the wrong destination.
Absolutely. I think that's something that we often don't think of is, you rely on other people in the organization to do those checks. And so you just assume they've been done already.
Yeah, and add to that scale and urgency. Going back to the previous point, obviously it become much bigger problem and much more vulnerability.
Definitely. So it's tempting to think that the only fix is to slow down. But for most companies, that's really not an option. So, how do you build resilience while staying agile? What practical steps can companies take to protect themselves even when they're under that pressure to continue to save?
So first, always when there is a suspicious, there is a suspicious. So slow down and make sure that you do whatever you need in order to verify.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, the world that we are living is changing. Gen AI is going to change a lot of things, right? And the attacker already utilize those in much better way and efficient that most of the organization are doing. But in order to be able to fight bad AI, we need to start adopt good AI to help us in this fight.
So, you just mentioned AI, right? Which is sort of industry buzzword and it's almost everything we talk about. What does that actually look like in the real world? What does using AI for fraud defense really mean?
So I think it first connecting different dots, connect the process itself, connecting the siloed system and leverage a lot of data to create smart decisions. You know, I would like to give you a real example. We have a lot of those every week, but I will give specific one. So we had a case with one of our customers, Fortune 500 organization, that basically a cyber criminal group targeted them. So first thing they did, they learned what's their controls look like, what their policy look like. Okay. But by the way, it's a cyber criminal group that are origin from Russia. They are did a lot of work, especially to fund the Ukraine-Russia war. So they are very active. And one of the biggest MO is they are looking for big invoices. They're not going less than $1 million. Okay. So in that specific case, they found a supplier, a chemical company that this company worked with. And what they did, they compromised the supplier. They start to look for big invoices. They found an invoice of $2 million that was already paid and was supposed to paid in the same month. Now they start to build an attack infrastructure. First thing they did, they register a lookalike domain for impersonation. So instead 1L, they use double L. No one will notice that, right? Second, they know that they're going to have a callback procedure. So they replicate the supplier website and change the contact detail there for later use. More to that, one of the biggest trends that we've seen in the last few years is that the attacker understand that some of the organization use different type of bank account validation and a penny drop test, all of those, right? So what they are doing today, when they compromise the supplier, they're going after their finance team. And they are still in different document that they used in the past to open their bank account. Now they use that to pass the KYC of the bank, to open a legitimate account on behalf of the supplier, and basically have a legitimate account to transfer the funds. Now, once they have all of that, they start the attack. First thing they did, they hijacked the email communication. They start to communicate on behalf of the supplier, although it's out of the picture, right? They don't know anything going on. But from the other side, the customer, they already paid this supplier a few times, like more than 30 different times. They are working with them for a long time. All the goods was delivered, and there is a lot of trust and relationship between them. And that's where the attack really worked, because the cyber criminal mostly focus on exploiting a trusted source. Okay, so now they ask to change the contact detail. They send us an email saying that our main contact person is retired. Please update the new contact details. Obviously, no concern. They updated everything fine. 3 weeks later, they asked to change a bank account. And what happened? Obviously, the account lady got a request and she followed the procedure through. It's a very straightforward process. She did it correctly. She called the updated number in the master data. She even didn't know that it was updated. Okay. Obviously, the fraudster gave us a good story why it happened. But then she followed the continue of the process. She asked for different evidence, like give me a bank approval letter, send me your new invoice with the new bank details. She collected that information, and then she used a bank account validation service, including the penny drop test. So think how many different steps they did in order to verify it.
Mhm.
At the end, it was compromised, right? So trust me, we believe that we need to look on the entire picture. And that's what we did. We monitor the email, we monitor the procurement, we monitor the changes, and we see all of that. So first we are able to detect that someone hijacked the communication. Okay, that was the first indicator. But then we've seen that there was a contact detail change, and we've seen that someone asked to change the bank account to different location that does, and we also enrich it. And we saw that in the business intelligence, this company don't have any entity in South Africa, for example. Okay? And at the end, we also were able to detect that the invoice itself was a fraudulent one. So that's basically how AI can be used to first connect the dots and make sure that you really protect the process end to end.
I like that sort of language of connecting the dots because once you sort of lose that, like in that example that you mentioned where the contact information was already compromised, so all those later controls didn't actually matter at that point. They, weren't helpful
Yeah,
now.
I'm working in fraud area for a long time. And one of the biggest struggle in fraud area is the amount of false positive. And more of that is because that you're looking on a very small or narrow data sets. Now, we believe that connecting the dots is the power here. And I will give you another example because I'm a father of two young kids. I was like to give this example. It's like those pictures. When you zoom in, you see the pixels. You don't understand the bigger picture. You don't understand what's going on there. But when you zoom out, oh, it's a dinosaur. And exactly that's how fraud happened. When you don't connect the dots, or you get a lot of alert fatigue, or you're missing the bigger part of the picture.
Definitely. So, this is sort of more of a fun question, but what trends or shifts do you think will define the next 12 to 18 months of vendor and payment fraud?
So I'm going to say that today we are speaking about mostly how cybercriminal, again, supercharge fraud aspect or in landscape using agent, Gen AI, and so on. I think that in the future, in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see agents verifying agents and fraud happen between them. So it's going to be much more interesting, much more complex, but it's going to be much more scalable.
Mm. And then on to our last question. If listeners remember just one thing from our conversation today, what should that be?
So I would like to say first, I have a lot of empathy to all of you. You're not alone. It's happening in almost every organization that I'm speaking with. The problem is no one really speaking about it. It's not being reported. People don't understand how big is this problem. And part of that, that's also the result why you're not always looking for better technology to really help your day to day.
Shai, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciated our conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed as well.
And thank you for listening. You can find this podcast along with all other episodes of Fraud Talk on acfe.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This has been Rihonna Scoggins, signing off.